Well, thank you all for coming today. This morning's talk is a Dharma talk about Dharma Talks, or to pay homage to my inspiration, let's see if I can do this right, a Dharma talk about Dharma Talks. Sorry, that's my Jerry Seinfeld impression. There was once an episode of Seinfeld where they were talking about a coffee table book about coffee table books. And I found that very funny. It was very meta to me. And that really became one of the themes for this talk, which is, what is it about Dharma Talks? And what are they? I mean, I guess to start, I'll start with a story. I was on a business trip last week, and I finished the trip, showed up back at Midway, went to the car park place, went to pay to get my car, and realized that my driver's license, by the way, my brand new driver's license that I had just gotten renewed, wasn't in its holder on my wallet. And there was this moment of panic. What did I do with it? Did I forget it? What am I gonna have to do? What happens if I get stopped? What about, right? But I caught myself because I remembered that had happened to me once before, and there was this secret compartment behind where I put my license that sometimes I would slide in. So I said, before I panic, I'm going to try looking in that place. Because of this memory triggered the action. And in fact, that's exactly where it was. So I avoided the suffering of thinking I had lost my wallet because of my memory. But our memory can do lots of different things. Okay, our acculturation. So I want to start with that. So if we were to define a Dharma talk, the first thing that we're going to do in our memories is think about what else is like this? How do I compare this to other events throughout all of our lives? A book report, a presentation, internally or externally, a TED Talk, a sermon, okay? All of these things are set up in a way that puts the speaker on one level of knowing and the audience on another level. And there is this transfer of information, knowledge, insights, all of these things. And for those of you who remember some of those activities growing up, and have studied a little bit of pop psychology, the idea of speaking in public is up there with snakes and death, I believe, in terms of common fears. So so the question really becomes, is that what I'm doing this morning? Because I can tell you that's what I did the first time I gave a Dharma talk. It was a couple of years ago, and I was about to go on the Zen Peacemakers Bearing Witness retreat to Auschwitz. Boy, do you really want to get started with a theme that can't miss in a Zendo, and that is, I'm going, to sit as it turned out, at the tracks at Birkenau, Auschwitz II, for 4 or 5 days. And it was everything that I thought it would be, and nothing like I thought it would be, all at the same time, which, for those of you who are familiar with our Zendo, and Zen in particular, yeah, it's everything and nothing all at once. But the idea really is, so how do you give a Dharma? Because I'm trying to come to grips with this process of what it is that I'm doing here, and what is a Dharma Talk. And a Dharma Talk can be a lot of things. A Dharma Talk can be a Teisho. And again, when the Roshis give Dharma Talks, they're called Teishos, and there's more of that traditional breakdown as a Roshi, an empowered priest, giving a lesson that we all can learn something from. So what am I am I falling into that? And the answer is really no. When I first did the Auschwitz retreat, Dharma Talk, I tried to create a masterpiece. I had quotes and facts and generated insights, and I wanted to portray all of it. And I wanted to be the best little smart little boy so mommy and daddy will love me. Okay, back another second. Yes, that's the trigger that I felt. Okay, I grew up in a family that respected and admired knowledge, and knowledge was this thing to get. And in coming to grips with this, I wrote a joke, which for those of you who are getting to know me, as I'm getting to know me, I tend to think in pop culture references, and I use jokes to help me mine the truth. And so the joke was, I'm about to give a Dharma talk, so I wrote the Dalai Lama a postcard. Why a postcard? Postcards are funnier than letters. That's a whole different issue. So I wrote the Dalai Lama a postcard. I said, hey Dalai Lama, I'm about to give a Dharma talk. What do you suggest I talk about? And the original punchline was, write about something you know. Because that's what everybody used to talk about in creative writing compositions. But it wasn't that funny. So I kept, as my friends and those closest to me would say, I went to workshop it, okay? What's the best punchline? And the next punchline that came out kind of fit better and then triggered parts of this talk, which is the Dalai Lama wrote me a postcard back and said, just write about something you don't know. I told that joke to my partner, she's like, I hope it goes over better with your friends. I'm like, me too. But the idea, the question now is, what is a Dharma talk? Is it talking about something you know about? Or is it talking about something you don't know about? And the answer is yes. It is both. How do you take a subject that you're comfortable with, that you may know something about, that you want to work with, and talk about it in a way of not knowing, which is the first tenet of the Zen peacemakers in our lineage. So you've got to know something, but you've also better not know it. So today, as we were getting ready, I came up here and there was a table with the flowers to put my drink. Ken, what drink do you want? I don't want a drink. Well, what about the table? No, move the table. And the idea is whether it's information, whether it is knowledge, insights, that which I feel the need to impart upon you to fill some role in my head, or whether it's the trappings, okay? The cup of tea, which by the way is not used to hydrate, but for those of you who have given a Dharma talk in the past, it is to collect your thoughts and take a breath when you've sort of hit a point where you don't know what to do. So for me, I've decided to use a term that Robert Roshi uses, that Ernie Glassman used to use, called a plunge. Okay, this is a plunge. I am attempting to talk about my history with Dharma talks and how that has changed over the course of my path in the last 2 to 3 years, which is about how long it's been since I started giving my first Dharma talk, to kick away the scaffolding, to lay myself bare, to basically not impart information, but have all of you engage in my public, and maybe you engage in some Dharma voyeurism as I deconstruct who I have been, where I am going, and what I'm trying to do every day when I wake up. And all of that then fills another role of the Dharma Talk, which is it's a love song. A Dharma Talk to me is a love song about your life, your path, and in this case, also the Zendo. And I was teasing at the Bare Bones retreat, the Interdependence Day retreat. I said, you know, Robert Roshi, you keep leaving the Zendo in a regular Zen talk. This is the second one. It's like it's good for the ego. I said, if I had an ego, it'd be upset. I do have it. But it made the knowing laughter. So the idea here is this is also a love song about this Zendo, about this Sangha, about the third treasure. Three treasures, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Because I don't feel like I am speaking in public. With the Sangha, I feel like I'm falling backwards, and y'all are going to catch me. That's what it feels like today. So for me, another thing about the Dharma Talk is the positioning of the talk in relation to the term that we all use, or a lot of us use, taking it off the mat. Okay? To me, literally, from a temporal and positional standpoint, we are less than an hour from when I was sitting, and probably 8 to 10 feet. And if that was a putt, it would be about 8 to 10 feet, yeah, away from where I was sitting. So I'm very, very close. And time permitting, I'd like to take this path off the mat, further off the mat, into some other things that what has happened is once I started working on this, and again, I have no notes, I have no table, I have as little scaffolding as I possibly can have in terms of offering something to you. All I have is my ability to tell you what I'm feeling, to follow in the absolute brilliance of some fellow Sangha members who have been able to open themselves up. Julie Chiso Case gave an amazing Dharma talk. She opened up and shared things that are incredibly difficult to share. Mark Shishingalula is a guy whose background is even more intellectually based than mine. I went to the Bronx High School of Science and Williams College and was proud of that, bought into the mythology of the college that you're going to go out into the world and be absolutely successful. And Mark, not just as a doctor, but as a professor of medical students, being able to open up and step away from that acculturation, that scaffolding of knowledge, that Aristotelian logic. Again, our ego and the way our brains work is our egos prevent us from getting in trouble. I believe Trungpa Rinpoche used to say, I got a student here, but that the ego keeps us from getting eaten by tigers, but not everything is a tiger. So not everything has to be figured out and broken down and repackaged. It can just be as it is. And sometimes that's really hard to just say what it is. So before I go any further, I was about to take a sip of my tea. Are there any questions? I'd like to make this as interactive as possible, either online or here. about what I've said so far. Do you agree, disagree, or silence equals just, I'm hungry, Ken, keep going? And that's okay too. Well, great. So I started with a little story, a little joke, and a little bit about me. And now to take it further, one of the things that I have found is I tend to think in pop culture references, words to music, words to songs, and for me, I find that off the map. And I was talking to my cousin Jody the other day, and I told her, you know, it's a Dharma Talk about Dharma Talks. She's like, oh, you like Seinfeld? I'm like, yeah. I said, Seinfeld is the most Buddhist television show ever. She goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, there was an episode where they were going to pitch a show. It was basically a meta event of pitching their show about their show. Does anybody remember what it was a show about?
Nothing.
It was a show about nothing. Yeah. And I thought that's brilliant. And Jody then challenged me. She goes, well, okay, I'll buy that one. What about another one? I said, well, imagine if there was an entire movie or a movie series about, you have a choice. Literally, you can take a pill. And you can take a pill. One pill will show you things exactly as they are, which is not pretty. Or one that will allow you to remain in the pleasant, empty delusions of your life. I don't know about you guys, but I would cast Keanu Reeves in that. Okay? Because that's the matrix right there. How do we view things? We have a choice in how we view things. And then my favorite is the most Buddhist movie of all time, which is Fight Club. Okay? Because everybody, what's the first rule of Fight Club? The first rule of Fight Club is there is no Fight Club. Okay? So what we're doing here, we're not here. We're not doing this because it doesn't exist. Yeah, but, right. So again, it's that, it's not either or, but not one, not two, something else. So for me, pop reference cultures allow me to see things, you know, it's the lowest form of art, is pop culture. But art is what moves us. Art is what takes us from where we are and gets us out of ourselves to another place. And as part of my love song to the Sangha, it is absolutely not coincidence that both of our Roshis are artists. They both know how to take the somatic experience, first to feel the somatic experience, and secondly, to be able to translate it using a medium that's accessible to other people. I use my humor to do that, certainly a lower level, but I'm good with it. But our Roshis have truly learned how to do that, and I find that incredibly helpful. So that's kind of what I've learned about me. I have also learned in giving Dharma Talks along my path that I'm comfortable sharing, but nobody's really comfortable opening up completely. So that's my goal. And I don't want to get into all of the usual traumas and the stuff growing up and what shaped me. That's not part of this story. But the only way I have been able to access this is with my sitting practice. And I have gone from about 5 years ago when I first moved, and of course, I was at a low point in my life. My marriage was ending. It's the middle of COVID. My kids all came home. They were not really happy that I moved out, but I was dying on the inside, and I knew that if I couldn't heal, I was going to die. I was dying figuratively. I really didn't want to die literally. And I was learning how to meditate on YouTube. Yongey Mingyo Rinpoche, a great young Rinpoche, who I believe a movie just came out about the book he wrote, where he literally escaped from his own monastery because he wanted to experience the world, not as a Rinpoche who has attendants and isn't allowed to carry money, but as an itinerant beggar. And it didn't turn out so well for him. He almost died. But the way he kept a first-person memory, literally to the point of death, and then back, inspired me. And so I was learning how to meditate. I also, this morning at the service, the sick and death list mentioned Bill Moyers. And Bill Moyers has a very special place in my life and in my path, because one day I was flipping through the TV, as I will do often, and I found a series called The Power of Myth, a 5-part series with Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist. And it opened my eyes, and that started my path to reading about Buddhism and Carl Jung and Robert Bly and the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell others, the stories that we hear from ourselves. And what do we do with it? Well, normally when we hear one of those stories, that guy's attacking you, you better defend yourself. One of the things we learn in the Zendo is we are not the voices in our head. We are the voices. We are the one who hears those voices, which means I am not bound to act upon them. And because of my sitting practice, I was able to start to get to know myself a bit. I've used this analogy several times, but somebody once asked Michelangelo how he sculpted David. And his answer was brilliant. He said, I just looked at the block and chipped away everything that wasn't David. Okay. That is what my son, who used to be an offensive lineman in college, would call not very complex, but very, very hard. He had a line coach who said, gentlemen, today we're going to do something that is not complex at all, but is very, very difficult. And as Harry explained to me, and he's a lot bigger than I am, he said, yeah, when you're a 270-pound lineman, and your job is to push another 270, 280-pound lineman out of the way who's trying to do exactly the same to you, that is not complex, but it is really hard. Okay? So I'm trying to strip away the complexity here and do something that is very, very hard. So in terms of Dharma Talks, if I were to give advice, it would be number one, come to Sunday morning Zen. Listen to some of the magnificent talks as people open themselves up and share themselves. The Teishos themselves are beautiful. I'm going to take one last quick side trip down the love song. But I once referred to the Teishos of Robert Roshi and Jun Roshi as follows. Robert Roshi is Beethoven, powerful, fills the room, gets you to experience it in a way that you can't with most other people. That's how I experience Beethoven. And Jun Roshi is Mozart. Just the absolute beautiful stories, the way she tells, even her pronunciation of words is all so direct, but yet so beautifully decorated like a fresh leg. And you know, those of you who know Jun Roshi. She's also a Kumu, master hula dancer. So again, it's the art and the beauty and the depth of our Roshis that gives us this opportunity. So please, come to Sunday Morning Zen, even if it's just online, listen to the Dharma Talks, and figure out something that you both know and want to not know, and plunge in. Okay? Keep as much scaffolding as you want or need, but try to let yourself out and fall backwards, and we will catch you. And that's exactly how I'm feeling right now. So I'm now going to take a step further away. I only went about 8 feet in less than an hour. Now I'm going to go back 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, 3 weeks I believe now, and about 1,000 miles away. I went back to my 40th college graduation. And let me tell you, there is no better way to figure out who you are than to see yourself through the eyes of people, some of whom you haven't seen in 40 years. And what I tried to do, and in the past I'd be like, I'm gonna go and hang out with my friends, and we're gonna have some drinks, and we're gonna, right, and relive the old times. But I was able to go back with no expectations. I was able to go back without some of the scaffolding and view I had nothing but coal with me, okay? And for those of you who received the email that was actually sent out to everybody in meditation training, there's a book that, and again, I'm very much want to become a teacher, not to teach internally, because there's plenty of people who can teach meditation within the 4 walls of the Zendo, but to start an outreach from the marketing circle, to start teaching people meditation. And the book that we're reading is The Mindful Brain, and it really goes into a secular standpoint about how the brain works and how mindful meditation affects who you are. And in reading this book, I started realizing the real effect that my meditation practice has had on me. And I said I went with nothing but coal. And coal is an acronym for curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love. Walking into a situation where I knew everybody there. There is nobody there other than spouses that I did not know because I went to college with them for 4 years. But I also did not know at all what people were going to be like, what I was like. And as a result of that, I had no expectations. So the first sort of trigger about things being different was I was with my partner, Erin, and we're driving in on 90. And Erin's looking at the map and she goes, we're passing through Buffalo. And I responded, yep. She goes, Niagara Falls is there. And I went, yep. And she said, I've never been to Niagara Falls. And I went, we should go. Now, keep in mind, the relationship that I have with my college is incredibly strong. And in past years, if I was driving in with anybody, and they said, let's stop and see the Niagara Falls, my answer would have been, no! We've got to get to where we're going. Where we go? We're going to my reunion and this thing, we have to get there, it's a destination. It's not a destination. The destination is, in fact, the path, the journey. And we went to Niagara Falls, and I'd seen it before, but I had never experienced it. We spent a couple of hours. We walked all around. We experienced it, we got wet. It is breathtaking. And we looked across at the Canadians going, sorry, sorry guys, we're sorry. So that was the first trigger to me, that something is different. That is doing the same thing over and over is not the same thing. I went to the same Niagara Falls, but it wasn't the same. Right? You can't, nobody can cross the same river twice because you're not the same and the river's not the same. And I felt that. It was kind of cool because Buddhist philosophy and the teachings of our Roshis can be understood and accepted quite easily. It's not hard to understand. But because Zen is so phenomenological, did I say that right? You have to feel it. That I find myself saying the same thing over and over to people, in particular Aaron, sorry, which is, oh no, well you've said that before. Yeah, but I thought it then. I feel it now. So just going back over the same things, which by the way was a moment of anxiety going, I've spoken about some of these things before. And I thought, Daigu, because that's who wrote this. This wasn't Ken. Ken would have written 8 pages, had the lectern, turn the pages, take the sit, get the points across. Daigu here is like, hey, this is gonna be fun. You know, let's find out what happens. And taking that off the mat is incredibly powerful and empowering. So the first thing was we get there and we had this wonderful experience already. And it was absolutely, I knew it was going to be a highlight before we even showed up on campus. And for those of you who've ever been to Williamstown, Massachusetts, it is one of the most beautiful cities, towns, burgs, village, whatever, outpost. So that is always a highlight for me. But being able to disengage from what I thought I was wanting to what was actually happening in the moment was really important to me. The next highlight was a talk. There were only 500 people in the class, and about 200 of them came back 40 years later. And of that group, about 50 of us gathered together just for a class talk about, of all things, grief. The thought of it was incredible to me because you don't go back to your college reunion, you go back to celebrate, talk about the old times, and raise a glass, and yada, yada, yada. But this conversation about grief, it was led by a classmate of mine, an artist, by the name of Peter Broom, whose daughter had OD'd on fentanyl. And so we were all sitting around talking about loss and grief. And he used art, he's an artist, to come to grips with this grief. And he was talking about the movement of art moving you and moving you through grief. And it was incredibly powerful, and as it turned out, 4 different classmates then spoke up. All of them had lost a child, 2 more to suicide. So this was a tribe, the class of 1985 at Williams College, rah, rah. But within that, we created this mini temporary tribe of people who were grieving and understood grief and had experienced grief or are anticipating grief. We're at the age, a lot of us, where our parents are getting to an age where we were, having to start to become parents to our parents. And that's anticipatory grief. But this idea of studying grief and opening up to something that is so opposite of how I defined myself previously was incredibly powerful. The last image I will leave you with from this event was immediately following this talk on grief. We had a private showing at the Sterling and Francine Clark Art Institute of Massachusetts. Now, this is an art museum. You would think, so what? There are lots of art museums. The Clark Art Museum in Williamstown, Massachusetts has the largest Impressionist collection outside of the Louvre in the world. And the reason is Sterling Clark was from the Clark Singer family, the sewing machine, multi-millionaire, living in France with his life, and was a patron of the Impressionists as they were getting started. Okay? And what's interesting about the Impressionists is we all put them up on this pedestal, but they were a group of artists who were shunned by the Salon in Paris. And everybody was painting at the time in the zeitgeist of France during the Industrial Revolution, these giant landscapes of progress and and the Impressionists got their name because they were just doing pictures of people taking a day off, or of a puddle by a house in a path. And one of the initial reviews, a very negative review, was someone who went to their art show and said, "These are nothing but impressions." And they're like, "Yeah, we dig that. We're going to be the Impressionists." So they bought a bunch of these paintings as patrons, and you talk about the unintended effects, but this was now when the museum was built in the 1950s. It was during the height of the Cold War. And for those of you who know where Williamstown, Massachusetts is on a map, it is 3 hours due west of Boston and 3 hours due north of New York, which put it out of the primary bomb blasts for Soviet bombs in the 50s. Now, of course, I could take care of all of that in one shot, but so this was built specifically as a result of the Cold War, and it was very, very interesting. So a classmate of mine who's a director of an art museum was giving a tour to the class and was telling us all about this because I had no idea. And then Erin just said, "Wait, I saw something." Okay. So we were going to head into another room, but she needed to go in another direction. Now again, Ken, "No, we gotta follow them. We need to be with the group." Now I was like, "All right, you go in this way. Let's see what's there." Something caught her eye. We went into another room. Something else caught her eye. She went into another room. And then she stopped. And I didn't notice at the time that tears were coming down her face. She had just come face to face with one of the 20 original Degas dancers. Framed in the doorway, up on a pedestal, and she broke down. Why did she break down? Well, even though Erin had never been to Williamstown before, had never been to, obviously, Williams College before, had never met anybody else in that room, she was with me during the grief, and Erin has lost her daughter. And by the way, she gave me permission to tell the story, because it's not my story to tell, primarily. Her daughter had cancer about 3 years ago, and she is studying to be a grief counselor, which again, going back to the theme of Dharma Talks, you use your counseling to help process your own grief, okay? So the role of the teacher and the student gets mixed, which was again an inspiration to me. But Erin used to be a dancer. Her daughter used to be a dancer. And Jordan, her daughter's name, had and still has in her room a replica of Degas dancer in her room. And so it was this amazing moment for her. And it was an amazing moment for me to be able to bear witness to that and support that. Because I'm not sure yet what my role is in fulfilling my bodhisattva vows. But I know that supporting Erin as she is working with people who have suffered incredible losses, the fact that I get to support that kind of makes me feel really good. So, and I will end that portion on a rather lighter note. So, of course, everybody we get together for cocktails and dinner out in the tent and right outside where we're staying. And I come across Bill Valerio, my classmate who gave the tour, and I went up to him and I thanked him. So I really want to thank you for telling us all about this, but I do want to share one thing with you. And I said, because Bill was at this talk about grief as well. And I said, Bill, talking about grief, and I said, I saw you at the talk, and then hearing about art as a way of moving through grief, creating that movement, because grief will get you stuck, and you need to find a way to move through it. And I said, and then I told him the story of Degas. I said, and I really think that what I want to start to do is grieve like an artist. And he looked me in the eyes. And Bill and I were not very close. We were one of those people who, if I saw him, I'd say hi and walk into class, but we didn't hang out. He looked at me, and then he looked down at my name tag. And I started laughing. I said, I know, fucking Ken Hillman just said that. And he looked up at me and he goes, yeah, I know. Like, we were both surprised that I could come up, because that wasn't who I was. And yet in experiencing the energy of a lot of my classmates and some of my friends, and one of the things I found that it didn't necessarily bother me, but those people who I was closest to while I was in college were not the people that I felt most comfortable with. And I really allowed the energy of the connections to resonate with me. Where can I open up? And when do I, say, hey, it's great to see you, really enjoyed it, take care. And noticing that it's not in all the people that I thought, and allowing that to guide me. And so it was a beautiful experience. Loved going, loved the travel, loved the whole process. And we were on a hike, and one of my old roommates said to me, so tell me about your journey. And I said, I don't have a journey, I have a path. And he said, well, tell me about what the difference is between a journey and a path. I said, I learned that journeys are spiritual materialism. I don't have a journey. A grand journey of exploration. Well, how different is that from, I have a Mercedes, it's brand new, and it's a convertible. It's really the same thing. But a path is just where I'm going. It's directional, not positional. There's no there. And I'm very comfortable with that. And taking away the scaffolding and going for the plunge, taking it off the mat is incredibly powerful when you start to realize, hey, this is kind of working. I kind of like this. But for me, the first milepost has really been when I do a Dharma Talk. What am I going to do? What am I offering? And I'm literally offering myself to all of you, and highly recommend the process. So thank you. Are there any questions about anything at all? Thank you, Ungo. Thank you. I'll be here all week.
Not a question, but a comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was listening to the radio on the way in this morning and had NPR on, and it was Hidden Brain. And he was interviewing a psychologist who was talking about post-traumatic stress, but also about post-traumatic growth. As long as the person has the purpose, knows their values, and is staying focused on that can help them get through the most incredible trauma.
Actually, an amazing book is Man's Search for Meaning, which is Viktor Frankl, where he basically said, I mean, he showed up with the manuscript for his new book sewn into the lining of his clothes, assuming if I just hide it in my overcoat, well, yeah, not so much. But the fact that he felt driven to tell this story and how it happened, he said was the reason he didn't die. It's the reason he was able to survive. So, absolutely, and the purpose and the meaning, yeah, I can tell you that on this path and with this Sangha and with my Roshis, I have not just started following the tenets of the Zen peacemakers and of the Sangha, but I've also created my own principles. And they are to find meaning, purposeful work, and experience love. If I can do one of those things, I'm not wasting my time. And so it is absolutely. So go ahead.
Oh, thanks for your talk, and much appreciated. I was glad to hear you, Seinfeld.
Sorry, could we use the microphone? Online folks, can you hear this okay? Or should we use the microphone? You can hear?
Microphone for the question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Microphone for the questions.
Well, thanks, Ken, for the talk. Much appreciated. I was glad to see you open with Seinfeld. I wasn't expecting that. But it pleased me because I've kind of always thought, and I wasn't the biggest Seinfeld fan. In fact, I watched most of the segments and reruns. But I'm thinking there's a Buddhist concept here because the show is, about nothing. And to add to that, the characters lacked form. They lacked substance. They were fairly shallow for most of the time. So, but I've always been afraid to say that in public. So thank you.
I'm glad I could help. And by the way, when I lived in New York, was when Seinfeld came out. I never watched it because I was living it. Now I appreciate it more. So, anybody else online, live? What? Hold on.
I just want to thank you very much for lifting the curtain beyond your jokes. It was very meaningful, and I'm going to be thinking about it for a while.
Thank you. As Shakespeare said, this is madness, yet there is method to it. So sometimes there is a method to Daigu's madness. Sometimes there's not. That's good too. Anybody else? Well, thank you all very, very much. Snacky doodle time.
What's in?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Ken.